Hey, welcome to Beta List. I've got Benjamin Dell here, the founder of Updatey. How are you?
Hello, very well, thank you.
Very cool. So, you're in London. You're the big shot agency guy. So tell me a little bit about tell me a little about
Fantastic.
yourself and sort of your background, and then we can sort of move on to what Updatey is and what you guys are sort of doing.
Sure. So I guess our day-to-day is what you see behind me, and we run a web and mobile development agency just outside of London, and we deal with startups right through to sort of SMEs and slightly beyond that.
Okay.
But we're passionate about ideas, whether they're small little tools that help specific niches or something a bit more grandiose. We love getting involved in those sorts of ideas and bringing them to market. And indeed, that's what we do with our clients. My background personally, I guess my education, I guess, starting from there has always been technical development. I've got a computer science degree, and then following that, I've always been involved in startups in some form or another, and always in the technology space. It's the thing that really gets me excited. It's my interest area. I'm reading about it all the time. I'm doing it all the time, and we're helping our clients do it day in day out as well. So it's pretty much everything I do, to be honest.
Okay. Very, very cool. So, you've got the how long has the agency been going, and what do you think that the agency sort of has brought to the sort of the startup era? Because you always hear I have many friends, and they have agency, but then they go into startups and they sort of say it's a much different experience in terms of how products are developed. It has to be done much faster. It has to be a little bit more agile. So what are your sort of experiences with just from going from the agency, or still having the agency, even in running the companies on the side? So
I think generally speaking, as with anything in life, you get out what you put in, and even though we've been going for 7 years, this is the agency. Certainly I do, and I think we all sort of consider it still a startup mentality.
mhm.
And I think there's nothing better than doing something, and that doing something is for me is the agency. Having that real world experience, and by doing that, you're learning techniques, the discipline as a team to get things done on time, on budget, all those sorts of things. And most importantly for me, like being an ideas man, I suppose, you're exposing yourself to so many problems, opportunities, situations, scenarios, types of clients, industries. It never stops, and also I think that for me is the biggest benefit of being involved in this day to day, and possibly why some of your friends that you just mentioned there have sort of evolved naturally from an agency to sort of startup space. You naturally you can't help but fall over
Yeah.
an idea every other day, something that could be done a better way, or something that that would sort of solve a pretty needed problem.
Very, very cool. So, how have you taken that and sort of gone to Updatey? If for like Updatey, we discussed a little bit, a little bit ago. It's sort of a client communications tool, for sort of agencies, developers. But elaborate on that. What exactly are you guys trying to go after? Who are you trying to target here?
Well, we know what we're trying to do now, but it's such a often used phrase, really pivoting and all that sort of stuff. But who
Yeah.
knows where it'll be in 6 months? But for now, we've got pretty firm ideas about what it means and what it should be representing within the space. And I guess that space is the project management space, I suppose. In a way, for us, it's an antidote to the typical project management suites you see out there. But also, I think, crucially, a companion. So in our mind, there's a bit of a gap. We've got traditional PM tools out there and task management tools, Pivotal Tracker, Teambox, Trello, we spoke about before, and a whole plethora of other stuff, some successful, some not. But in our mind, they deal with, and most of them very well, the day-to-day noise of what keeps a project ticking. So we're talking tasks, comments on tasks, priorities on tasks, even individual Git commits, and all these sorts of things that are great for technical teams or people that, the real in-depth project managers and
Yeah.
people that really want to, in some bizarre cases, clients who really want to get under the nitty-gritty. But they're not really designed for that bigger picture. They're not really designed to provide a genuinely useful and natural space for clients to have a really useful insight into what their project's doing. Where are they? Where have they been? What are the next steps? And also, I think there is also a disconnect and therefore a need with existing PMs and project owners or business owners where they feel, look, we're building something. It might be a 2-week project, it might be a 2-year project, but we're building something and we've got these stakeholders, clients, investors, reporters, whatever they might be, and actually I'm struggling to convey where we're up to. And there's a lot of stuff out there, or there's some stuff out there that partially deals with that. We've got some tools out there that will, we've heard of some tools out there that will actually send an email out to a team, to a distributed team, where they then respond, type in what they've been doing, a little highlight if you will, and then that gets redistributed simply through email to the other people in that team. So it sort of compiles a summary sheet of what's going on. That's really lo-fi, but it gets the job done, and actually there's a lot of people using that sort of approach. So I guess ours is sort of really taking that one step up, turning it into a genuine product, and just something that both the PM and the client or the stakeholder alike can really feel engaged with and hopefully enjoy using and being kept up to date with.
Okay, very cool. So more just like the communications and sort of this to saying to a client like here's where we're at, here's our current standing, like we'll be finished on this, just like basically a timeline for how the project is going and like just sort of what milestones have been reached so far, right? So
yeah, so terminology-wise on Updatey, we've got two main things really. You've got milestones and you've got checklists within milestones, which we're sort of heavy in development in terms of improving at the moment. And the reason we're just dealing with those sort of high-level sort of words and naming conventions is simply that we want people to think high level when they start using Updatey. So we don't necessarily, although they could if they wanted to, get the really granular task-based sort of stuff in there. This is supposed to be a timeline that deals with the high-level strategic milestones, the key steps that one needs to go through. So that's what we're trying to get them to do. So yeah, front and centre of Updatey, we've got what we think, and hopefully most of our users so far, a gorgeous visual timeline that just sort of really gets the clutter out of the way and just lets people easily see, okay, we've got 10 milestones, we're 35% complete through there, we've got 16 days and 6 hours, if you want to go that granular, until the next milestone. This one's out overdue. So it's just a really high-level way of seeing what's going on, and we've got other sections after that, but that's the front and centre and the main purpose of why you would use Updatey.
Okay, very cool. And so tell me about where this sort of came from. I mean, obviously this doesn't just spring up out of thin air. Like I'm going to create some sort of timeline management tool. So did it come from the agency or your own personal experience? Did you 37 signals it and rip it out of your own company? Or
No, I mean it's come from a couple of places, to be honest. I mean, first and foremost, through the agency, it just sort of dawned on me a few months ago that God, the amount of emails or telephone calls or Skype calls or whatever it might be from clients that we're getting that are simply asking, what's the status, or what was the last project milestone we just completed, or what's the next milestone, how many days do we have left, are there any risks that we need to know about? These are quite high-level things. This is not day-to-day. We've already dealt with the day-to-day. This is really quite a fundamental but quite a simple question. And so the dawned on me that, hang on, if clients are asking us that sort of question, could it be argued that by virtue of that, there's an unwritten sort of, unspoken sort of comment there that really we're not doing our job properly, or certainly that's how I interpret it. Yeah. That really, as owners of that project and helping them run through it, they should know at any one point where they're up to, and we should have done enough to make them feel at ease about that. So if they're having to come to us fairly frequently to say, where are we up to, can you just remind me what's going on? For me, there's a disconnect, but something is missing somewhere, and we deal with Gantt charts on every single project, so we're pretty familiar with that, and in fact, we send out a Gantt chart. We think they're pretty beautiful. We're mostly, well, I say mostly, we're sort of half Mac based here. Yeah. So the Gantt chart comes from a Mac. It looks fairly beautiful, but actually, we don't really think the clients are looking at it properly, and are they understanding it properly? It's even a Gantt chart, as visual as it is in its intent, it's still a little bit technical, isn't it, I suppose? Yeah. Certainly as soon as you start putting in resource allocations and budget sort of restrictions and things that one might argue doesn't necessarily need to be in there. So for us, we thought, look, let's have a little chat and see, internally that is, whether there's something we can do that would provide a client with what we think they need on a weekly basis, but also whenever they need to dip in and just find out what's going on without having to go through us, and something that sort of instills confidence.
Yeah, very, very cool. And in terms of your pre-launch, like things like that, like you've worked in a few other companies, you've been around the block. What are your sort of goals, or what things are you doing to sort of drum up that first user base? Get everything put together and sort of have a successful push out into the market. Everyone always has these different stories and techniques, but it's always very interesting to see what people are doing. So
yeah, sure. we've all got different experiences. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way you look at it, one of my first startups was one where we spent 2 solid years trying to build something. We had really quite specific and we thought quite wonderful hypotheses over how the customer would want this sort of product and engage with it. But we spent 2 years building it and only really very loosely showing it to 1 or 2 key clients.
Yeah.
We did have partial success afterwards, fortunately, but it ultimately died, I think, because 2 years worth of development, no matter which way you look at it, 2 years worth of development without validating that what you're delivering is going to create bloated output, and ultimately that's what we had. So it kind of died by the wayside, and it has taught me that you're not going to know whether something's successful until you get it out into the marketplace. So what can you do to get it out there as quickly as possible? But there is one proviso for me, that it's not just good enough to get it out there quick, the quickest you can, because ultimately I'm not in the market for coming up with an idea, literally creating a squeeze page, and then seeing if people knock on the door. Because for me, that doesn't really prove too much, other than the fact that you've got your marketing caption good enough. Some people live by that, and that works for some people. But for me, I think actually, and particularly because we do everything in-house anyway, we have the opportunity to build our own things. I think actually, as a discipline, if you can force yourself to bottle that idea into a core essence, into something that is by its very nature simple, that you can then roll out fairly quickly. And I'm talking here sort of in a 2-month development life cycle, nothing more than that, really quickly. Inception, polished design, polished but simple and refined deliverables, get it out to the marketplace. The quicker you can do that, the better. And that's pretty much what we did with Updatey. So we sort of started the design in April, I think. We've got a day job here, so we spent a good couple of months just going backwards and forwards on that, not really rushing it through. We then spent a couple of months developing, and then 2 weeks ago, as you know, we launched the beta. And for me, the objective was twofold. 1, to get it to the beta community as soon as possible, and 2, to really be passionate about keeping in touch with and opening up all communication channels with our beta users. So we've got obviously the standard sort of Facebook and Twitter, but email, I personally contact a lot of people. Reddit has been really useful.
It's very interesting.
And in every single email that we send out, we include our direct office number as well, and we invite people to call us, particularly those in the beta process. People who possibly have become frustrated because beta often means bug here or there, although unfortunately we only have 1 or 2 of those. But I just want to chat to people. I want to find out what's going on. I think if you do that, in theory, you can contain the beta process to a fairly small sort of period. So we're hoping our beta period to sort of last about 4 to 5 weeks. So we're about halfway through. We've got about 2.5 weeks to go.
Okay, very cool.
Pretty well.
Very cool. And then, what's the sort of you look on the site now, and monetization is always a very touchy subject, especially coming out of beta or something like that. But what are your plans, I guess, for monetizing the app and sort of, I'm assuming some sort of plans, but for now it's free. It's a very strategic sort of move, because many people when they depending, it always depends on the app, of course, but some people, they would go and they would say, okay, I've launched my beta. You're going to pay $5 a month for it for my monetary validation or something like that. But for you guys, why'd you decide to put it out for free, which is very normal. But in your specific situation, that, and then also what are the plans to sort of monetize that in the future?
First of all, I think it's really important not to pay too much attention to your competitors. Insofar as you should keep your eyes wide open, of course. You want to know what's going on and keep your ears to the ground, all that sort of stuff. But really, as you said, what works for one startup and what works for one vertical or industry or whatever doesn't necessarily work for you. Take some influences, take some suggestions, but ultimately you've got to make a decision based on your own merits. And for me, that falls down to the value and the demand. So what are we doing that is valuable, or are we doing anything that's valuable to our marketplace? And is there a marketplace that's large enough? And you can only really do that once you've exposed it in some fashion to that marketplace. And for us, that's the beta. So it was always a natural sort of decision to have the beta being completely free. We don't want to restrict in any sort of fashion. We want people to just use it. So that's how we're working it. So for the next 4 to 5 weeks, we'll be free beta, unrestricted, and then in about 3 to 4 weeks, we will start releasing our payment plan. So I guess we're going to be fairly traditional there, and we haven't released the exact numbers and specifics at this stage. But we're thinking there will be 3 packages free, something basic, and then something more the pro sort of thing.
Okay.
But something that is important to me is that the free version is usable. I've seen so many where you get so invested as a beta user in the product, you think, this is the thing for me. and then it becomes too expensive. And I think the thing to bear in mind is that when people use something day in, day out, and it's such an integral part of their business sort of work life, you can possibly afford to squeeze the free package a little bit more. But sometimes that's not the case, and sometimes people do just use it for this hobbyist project or a little church faith thing or whatever it might be. And so you don't want to shut these people out. You want to make sure that people that have a genuine reason for it, but it's not something that they're going to use every single day, can still use it in a good enough capacity. So we're really thinking hard about getting that balance right. But as I say, we haven't quite released the numbers yet, but it's definitely not going to be per user or per project. I personally hate it when it happens because, God, scalability. Zendesk, for example. I don't want to badmouth other companies, but we walked away from that. As an agency, we use help desks all the time, and we walked away from Zendesk after a few months because as you increase the agents, you're spending an extra $40 per month just to add someone else on there. It just seems crazy to me. So it's really important that we get the balance right, and hopefully we'll do that with the help of our beta testers.
Very, very cool. And it's sort of always the lovely question I like to ask is what's sort of the biggest success and the biggest failure that you've had when either on Updatey or maybe something else in terms of other types of companies, and what have you learned from those lovely moments in life? So
Well, if my wife ever does watch this, which I doubt she will, 'cause it's far too boring for her, I better say my successes have been my kids. Well, that's not really business oriented. My biggest failure, I've actually already mentioned. I think it is that 2-year sort of development span that we worked through on a previous startup.
Yeah.
So I won't talk about that one. Another one that could be thought of as a failure, but it's ongoing, shall we say? So it could turn into a success. We'll see. We were speaking about this earlier, and we're playing around with this idea, and we have done for the last year. It's a bit of a hobby project for us, and it's called InstaButler. And it's a hobby because it is 100% reliant on a third-party provider.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, red flag straight away. Don't throw all your eggs into that basket because if you're 100% dependent on someone else, some external thing, that should raise alarm signals. But we thought we'd give it a go because it's a fairly simple premise, and we thought we'd give it a go and see what we could do with it. I won't go into the details. You can look at instabutler.com if you want to. It basically just helps people create genuine, non-spammy likes on Instagram. And we've had some pretty good successes with that. In the last 2 months, we've picked up about 35,000 new users. The failure part is that 2 months ago, Instagram overnight switched off our API access without even notifying us. So. And there's a remarkable aspect to that, which is despite that, we've still managed to pull in 35,000 to 40 users, which is great. We're telling them, of course, that we're hopeful that we'll be able to switch it back on, but for the time being, it's currently off. And so, there's a lot of investment of time and thought, and certainly from the user standpoint, they've bought into the idea of InstaButler. And unfortunately, at the moment, it's completely dead because we've created a product that was 100% dependent on someone else. Yeah. But there you go. That's why for us it was a bit of a hobby, a bit of a background experiment, if you will.
Okay, very interesting. It's always I always say to different friends or whoever it is if they always have some Twitter product or whatever it is, you have to be extremely careful because these companies Facebook might buy you, maybe, but Twitter and maybe Instagram and a few others they just kill you.
Sure.
And it's the biggest thing you always have to watch out for is there's no mercy in technology. Yeah. It's just it's just boom boom and that's it. So, but very cool.
Isn't that why app.net started? I think because I think he was originally talking in close talks with Facebook themselves, and I think he was screwed in some fashion, and so he's it was all a go, and then one day it was not a go, and so he went away and set up app.net. I think.
Yeah.
So be careful with these things. You can get some.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point. So, but I can't wait to see what you guys do in the next couple months here and how the beta goes. And it's been great chatting. So keep me up to date and so thanks, man.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Cheers.